On a calm April morning in 2013, Fiona Anderson was spotted walking through the streets of Lowestoft, holding her youngest son's favorite teddy bear. People passing by didn't think much of it. They just saw a mother quietly singing a lullaby. But what no one knew was that Fiona had made some heartbreaking choices that would soon change everything. Just hours later, emergency responders would arrive at a shocking scene, leaving the whole community in disbelief. What really happened behind closed doors that morning? Fiona Anderson, born in 1990 in the United Kingdom, was one of three daughters to Carrie and Michael Anderson. Her father served in the Royal Air Force, while her mother was a devoted homemaker who cared for their three children. Fiona had two sisters, Claire and Laura, and they shared a close bond, growing up in a harmonious family environment. Fiona attended various primary schools in Lowestoft, a town in Suffolk, England. She was often described as a bright and beautiful child who loved Disney movies and playing with her dolls. In her early years, she was outgoing and popular, but as she grew older, Fiona became more withdrawn and easily prone to mood swings. Her sudden changes in behavior worried her parents, who took her to several specialists. Although she was diagnosed with mental health issues, no specific condition was identified, and her situation worsened over time. Despite the efforts of her family to support her, Fiona insisted that she could manage her problems on her own. She eventually met a young man named Craig McClellan, and they began a relationship. In 2008, Fiona and Craig decided to move in together, even though neither had steady jobs. Craig frequently switched from one job to another, leading to an unstable situation for the couple. That same year, Fiona became pregnant, adding to their financial and emotional strain. According to family members, her mental health continued to deteriorate during her pregnancy. She refused to attend regular prenatal appointments or follow the advice of her parents and doctors. Craig also resisted any outside interference from Fiona's family. In June 2009, due to concerns about Fiona's prenatal care and the unstable family environment, Obstetric Services referred her case to Child and Youth Services. Soon after, the authorities intervened to ensure the well-being of the unborn child. On July 21, 2009, Fiona and Craig welcomed their first daughter, Lavina. After her birth, social workers requested that the couple agree to place Lavina under voluntary care, but they refused. Just 2 months later, Lavina was admitted to the hospital, where doctors found that she was severely underweight, likely due to malnutrition. After receiving care, she began to gain weight, confirming that she had not been properly fed by her parents. Despite repeated attempts by social workers to convince Fiona to surrender custody due to concerns about her mental health, she insisted that she was a good mother and would never give up her daughter. Shortly after this incident, Fiona and Craig were evicted from their home due to unpaid rent. They were forced to rely on the generosity of friends and family, which did not provide the stable environment needed for raising a child. For a time, they stayed with acquaintances and then moved in with Craig's parents. Things seemed to improve for a while, and the involvement of social services lessened. In June 2010, Fiona gave birth to their second child, a boy named Addie. However, with two small children and Craig's inconsistent income, the couple faced increasing financial challenges. Fortunately, Craig eventually secured a stable job, allowing them to rent a house in Lowestoft by February 2011, and it appeared that they were finally finding some stability. However, by May 2011, social services were once again alerted after neighbors reported that Lavina and Addie had been sleeping in a double stroller for 13 nights and had been fed only biscuits. When social workers and the police visited the home, they found the children malnourished and confined in playpens. The children were assessed, and it was determined that they were emotionally affected and had delayed language skills, leading to their inclusion in child protection plans for neglect. Fiona felt victimized and deeply offended by the suggestion that she was not a good mother. Craig, meanwhile, was often absent from home, claiming he was working extra hours to provide for the family, although his income did not reflect this. Despite their troubled relationship and the challenges they faced, Fiona and Craig did not take precautions to prevent further pregnancies. In May 2012, their third child, Kaiden, was born. Social services quickly became involved due to concerns about the parents' ability to care for another child. By August, child protection officers decided to initiate legal proceedings against the family. However, due to a lack of follow-up by a social worker, the case stalled. As their financial difficulties continued to mount, Fiona discovered in late 2012 that she was pregnant with their fourth child, a girl. Fiona's mental health, already fragile, was further strained by the hormonal changes brought on by her frequent pregnancies and childbirths, leaving her unable to cope with the mounting stress, according to her family. Fiona Anderson was growing increasingly isolated and refused any help from others, allowing only Craig to remain close, though he was drifting further away each day. By then, Craig had started an affair with a beautiful Polish woman he had met at work. The idea of moving in with her was highly appealing, as there would be no children to care for, and they could live a carefree life together. In March 2013, Craig decided to leave Fiona and move in with his lover, though he never disclosed the real reason for their separation. He simply packed his belongings and left, abandoning Fiona with 3 children, another on the way, and no job. Meanwhile, social services continued to monitor the family's deteriorating living conditions, especially now that a fourth child was soon to be born. On the afternoon of Sunday, April 14, 2013, Craig visited the house, bringing chocolate biscuits for his children. After spending some time with them, he told Fiona they needed to talk. During their conversation, the 24-year-old revealed that he had started a relationship with another woman and that their separation would be final. This news confirmed Fiona's suspicions about why Craig had been staying out late, supposedly working extra hours in recent months, and his intention to leave her and the children. Fiona's reaction was explosive. She completely lost control, and during the argument she grabbed a sharp object from the kitchen and stabbed Craig in the shoulder. He fell to the floor, bleeding, while their terrified children watched. Craig managed to escape from Fiona's rage, covering the wound with a napkin, and called an ambulance which took him to the hospital around 8 p.m. At the hospital, Craig lied to the doctors, claiming he had been attacked by a stranger trying to steal his phone. He later explained that he lied to avoid further complications with social services, fearing his children might be taken away and placed in foster care, a threat they had faced many times before. Craig believed Fiona was solely to blame for their problems with social services, and he denied any responsibility for the negative assessments they had received. As he prepared to leave the hospital, Craig received a text message from Fiona. In it, she told him to say goodnight to their children, as it would be the last time he would ever see them. Craig left the hospital and went to his new partner's house, not giving the message much thought. The hospital staff reported the attack to the police, but by the time officers arrived to speak with Craig, he had already left. They decided to visit the last address they had for him, the home he had shared with Fiona and their children. When they rang the intercom, Fiona refused to open the door and claimed she hadn't seen Craig in over a month. With no further leads, the police left. At around 8:30 a.m. on April 15, 2013, the police and emergency teams rushed to a parking lot after receiving a call from someone who had found a woman's body in a residential area. Paramedics tried to resuscitate her, but unfortunately, she was pronounced dead at the scene. The investigators noticed 4 names written on her body, and judging by her heavily pregnant appearance, it was clear she was in the advanced stages of pregnancy. After examining the scene, it was apparent that the woman had fallen from a high building, resulting in her immediate death along with that of her unborn baby. Forensic analysis would be needed to confirm the cause of death. An investigation was quickly launched to identify the deceased woman, and surveillance footage from the area showed a woman wearing the same clothes as the victim. This footage helped the police identify her as 23-year-old Fiona Anderson. With Fiona's identity confirmed, the police learned that she was known to Child Protective Services and had 3 children. Police rushed to Fiona's home, and when no one answered the door, they forced their way inside. What they found was beyond anything they were prepared for. The 3 young children were discovered lifeless on the bed in the main bedroom. They were tucked in, surrounded by stuffed animals, each with a kiss mark in lipstick on their foreheads. Messages written in green marker covered the walls. One note read, "I love you and will keep you safe. I tucked them into bed with their teddies. They love their teddies. They look so peaceful together." Each child had a message written on their torso, "I love you," along with their name in green ink and a small heart on their abdomen. Investigators also found a torn letter in the trash, offering a heartbreaking glimpse into Fiona's mental state. In the letter, she wrote about her inability to cope with Craig's abandonment and expressed her intent to take her own life while also taking her children with her. She reiterated her belief that a mother never leaves her children behind and pleaded for Craig to allow them all to be buried together. The children's bodies were taken to a hospital for autopsies to determine the causes of death. Meanwhile, police cordoned off the apartment to continue their investigation. The tragic news spread quickly, and neighbors and friends gathered outside the building, leaving flowers, teddy bears, and other tributes in a makeshift memorial at the entrance. Craig, accompanied by his mother, also visited the site, where they were met by a crowd of media reporters. In an interview, Craig admitted that he had a gut feeling it was Fiona when he heard the news about a woman who had taken her own life. He expressed his devastation, saying he had just lost his entire family. During an interview with investigators, Craig confessed that Fiona had attacked him the previous night when he told her he was leaving for another woman. For the police, Craig's departure appeared to be the final trigger that led Fiona to end her life and the lives of her children. A young woman who knew the couple described Fiona as a charming person who didn't seem like the type of mother who would harm her children. As detectives continued their investigation, they discovered that, just hours before the tragedy, Fiona had posted desperate messages on social media, revealing that Craig had left her for someone else. In her posts, she wrote that all she ever did was love him, and despite the pain he caused, neither she nor her children ever gave up on him. She also uploaded photos of her children, expressing how much she loved them. In one of her final posts, Fiona shared an ultrasound image and wrote that she was expecting a baby girl. After piecing together all the evidence, investigators concluded that it was Fiona who had tragically ended the lives of her children. Authorities released surveillance footage to the media in hopes of piecing together the final moments of Fiona Anderson's life. This strategy proved effective, as around 13 people came forward to tell the police they had seen the young woman walking through the city on the morning of April 15th. Thanks to these witness reports, officers were able to obtain clearer footage showing Fiona wearing a long white coat and black shoes, captured outside her home around 6:20 a.m. on that tragic morning. Fiona was seen heading toward Craig's residence, where she left a note in his mailbox. She then dropped off the keys to her apartment at a local hostel so Craig could pick them up later. Afterward, she wandered through the city for over an hour, carrying her youngest son's favorite teddy bear. Several passers-by reported that as she walked, she softly sang a lullaby. By 8:30 a.m. that same day, a cleaner in a multi-story parking garage spotted Fiona climbing up to the top level, still humming her lullaby. The cleaner watched as Fiona climbed onto the railings and then, without hesitation, leaped into the air, ending her life and that of the baby she was carrying. At this point, the police had received the results of Fiona's autopsy, confirming that she had died from severe head injuries consistent with a fall. However, investigators had not yet determined the cause of death for her 3 children, so further tests were needed. A close friend of Fiona's created a memorial page on social media in her memory. The page quickly filled with comments, many asking for respect and remembering Fiona as a warm and kind-hearted woman who would do anything to help others and adored her children. Other comments from friends and family expressed their grief over the loss and hoped that Fiona had finally found the peace she was searching for. Amid the mourning in May 2013, partial autopsy results were released for the children, revealing that all 3 had drowned. The post-mortem examinations found no signs of abuse or violence. According to the police's reconstruction of events, Fiona had prepared the bath, and after submerging her children one by one until they stopped breathing, she dried them off, laid them on her bed, and covered them with blankets, placing their favorite teddy bears in their arms. Once the examinations were completed, Fiona's family was able to claim her body, while Craig and his relatives took custody of the children's remains. In a televised interview, Fiona's parents, Michael and Carrie, pleaded with Craig to allow their daughter to be buried with her children, as it was her final wish, expressed in the letter she had left behind. Despite their heartfelt pleas, Craig refused to let the children be buried alongside the woman who had taken their lives. On June 5th, surrounded by friends and family, the funeral for the children was held. Fiona's family was not allowed to attend. 10 days later, around 75 mourners gathered to say their final goodbyes to Fiona. Dozens of people, many dressed in pink, attended the funeral, which also served as a memorial for her 3 children. A horse-drawn hearse carried Fiona's body to the cemetery, where she was buried alongside her unborn daughter. Fiona Anderson's mother expressed deep gratitude to the local community for their support as they navigated the aftermath of the tragedy. She described Fiona as an amazing woman and a devoted mother who adored her children. In the wake of Fiona's death, many began to question the roles of both the police and social services in the tragedy. As a result, the Independent Police Complaints Commission launched an investigation. It was revealed that officers had visited Fiona's residence just hours before her death while investigating the stabbing of Craig. The inquiry centered around whether the police could have prevented the tragedy if they had entered the home, rather than merely speaking with Fiona through the intercom. After a thorough evaluation, the commission determined that there was no way for the officers to have predicted what would happen in the following hours. Between 2009 and 2013, social workers had visited Fiona's family more than 50 times. There were documented concerns that the children were often left in their stroller and, on some days, were only fed biscuits. An independent expert involved in the investigation noted that Fiona had been reluctant to cooperate, which hindered any psychiatric evaluation and prevented necessary legal actions. Although the deaths of her children weren't deemed predictable, the expert believed that if the children had been taken into care earlier, the tragedy might have been avoided. The coroner overseeing the case echoed this sentiment, stating that while it was not his intention to assign blame, it was evident that key steps, such as evaluating Fiona's mental health, had not been taken. He called for UK health authorities to prioritize providing support to parents with mental health challenges. The investigation also revealed communication failures and a lack of coordination between the various services involved in Fiona's care. It emerged that the assigned social worker was an unqualified trainee who had not handled the case appropriately due to inexperience and a lack of understanding of the severity of Fiona's situation. This worker should have been supported by a more experienced mentor who could have guided them in dealing with such a complex case. The head of social services in Suffolk defended the lack of intervention, acknowledging that some families are harder to engage than others. However, he also emphasized that it is the duty of social workers to protect children and provide the right support to families. As a result, several recommendations were made to improve the system's ability to support families in crisis. These included better training for social workers, improved communication between services, and a more proactive approach to identifying and assisting those at risk. Fiona Anderson's case shocked the community and underscored the need for meaningful support and monitoring for families facing similar crises. Mental health analysts confirmed that Fiona deeply loved her children but had a distorted perception of reality due to her mental health struggles. Although she was aware of her actions, she had lost her sense of direction after Craig's departure, leaving her isolated with her darkest thoughts and fears. Fiona felt lost, and the only solution she saw to free her children from future pain was to take them with her to a better place where they could all be happy together, free from the stress of bills and financial worries. Despite knowing about Fiona's struggles and the challenges she faced with their children, Craig abandoned them all for a new life with his lover. He ignored the warning signs, including the final message Fiona sent him, which hinted at her intention to take drastic action. Many people sympathized with Craig, sharing his grief as a father who had lost 4 children. However, others criticized his behavior, considering him partly responsible for the tragedy. They believed Craig should have recognized Fiona's deteriorating mental health, especially after their first child, and taken steps to help her. Instead, by leaving her pregnant with their 4th child, he had abandoned her when she needed support the most. In this tragic story, the only innocent victims were the 4 children. They suffered from their mother's mental health problems, their father's abandonment, and the lack of protection from the official agencies that were supposed to safeguard their well-being. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes. In the early hours of June 14, 2006, the quiet neighborhood of Bloomfield, Connecticut, was changed forever. What seemed like just another day took a dark turn when the truth about a hidden crime came to light. Danielle Kramer, a 14-year-old girl who had been missing for nearly a year, was found locked away in a small, secret room. The discovery was a shock not only to her loved ones, but also to the investigators who had been searching for her all that time. What first looked like a simple case of a runaway teen quickly turned into a chilling story of manipulation, abuse, and horrors that no one could have imagined, exposing the terrible reality hidden behind closed doors. Danielle Kramer was born in the state of Connecticut, USA, sometime in the early 1990s. While the identity of her father remains undisclosed, it is known that her mother was a woman named Jennifer. After Danielle's birth, Jennifer remarried, and soon the family expanded when the couple had another child, whose name was never revealed. Danielle's parents ran a business that involved both a daycare center and a dog breeding operation in Bloomfield, a small town in Hartford County, Connecticut. Growing up surrounded by these animals, Danielle developed a strong affection for them. It was this love for dogs that, in 2005, led Danielle to cross paths with a young woman in her mid-20s named Kimberly, who worked as a dog trainer. Thanks to her, Danielle met Adam Galt, a 40-year-old man who also worked as a dog trainer and had experience in related businesses like dog breeding and grooming. Since Adam's business intersected with Danielle's family's business, her stepfather had briefly worked with Adam at some point. This connection led Danielle, eager to gain professional experience, to start working for Adam at his grooming and dog training business in Bloomfield and West Hartford. But what initially seemed like a healthy and innocent relationship between a young woman passionate about animals and a man experienced in the field soon turned dark and dangerous. Without Danielle's parents knowing, Adam started communicating frequently with her through messages and calls. He developed a completely inappropriate attraction to Danielle, who was still a minor at the time. Exploiting the admiration she had for him professionally, Adam began a seduction plan that quickly affected the naive girl. Adam gradually introduced Danielle to the world of drugs and alcohol, manipulating her until she agreed to an intimate relationship. He convinced the young girl that he loved and accepted her as she was, unlike her parents who were trying to raise her with stricter controls to curb the impulsive behavior typical of adolescence. Danielle, who had been described as a good girl, began exhibiting strange behaviors and became extremely rebellious towards her parents. Unbeknownst to them, Adam was the driving force behind these negative changes. At school, Danielle did not hide her relationship. It was later revealed that she openly told her friends she was involved with a 40-year-old man named Adam, whom she claimed was her boyfriend, and that she loved him. However, she also confided in them that he had hit her, and they had broken up and reconciled multiple times. By 2006, Danielle had run away from home several times, disappearing for days at a time, and when she returned, she refused to tell her parents or the authorities where she had been or with whom. It was always Adam who was behind these disappearances, testing how far Danielle was willing to go to fulfill his desires. In June 2006, Adam's manipulation reached its peak. Danielle, accompanied by Adam, went to the Bloomfield Police Department. There are two versions of what happened on June 13th. One version suggests that Danielle filed a complaint against a friend of her brother, accusing him of sexual abuse, for which she claimed her family had not protected her. However, the more widely accepted version is that the teenager reported to the authorities that she had been mistreated and neglected at home by her mother and stepfather. She expressed feeling unsafe and stated her desire to move in with Adam, an adult she trusted. From that moment on, Danielle distanced herself from her family entirely, with Adam firmly in control of her decisions. This was not the first time Adam had taken advantage of a young woman in this way. Kimberly, the dog trainer who had introduced Danielle to Adam, had also met him as a teenager. Before that, she had experienced a traumatic situation of intimate violence, leaving her very vulnerable. When she met Adam, she saw him as a hero, like someone who rescues princesses from castles. They began a relationship, and over the next 6 years, Adam transformed from a hero into a villain, one of the worst kinds. He dominated and controlled Kimberly, turning her into a sort of slave. To make matters worse, Kimberly wasn't the only woman subjected to Adam's control. Adam was also in a relationship, later described by authorities as a common-law partnership, with a woman named Anne Murphy. Despite having a stable partner, he brought Kimberly into the fold, creating a three-person dynamic, often referred to as a throuple, whether romantic or intimate. According to reports, both women agreed to this type of relationship and even lived together at times. However, it is likely that they had little say in what happened, as Adam was the dominant force in the household, punishing disobedience. It was under this same man's influence that Danielle's life took a dark turn, leaving her confused and manipulated. When Danielle didn't return from school on June 14, 2006, authorities and her parents initially thought it might be another one of her mysterious escapes, so panic didn't set in immediately. However, as days passed, it became clear that this disappearance was different. Danielle always called to say she was okay, but this time there was no contact with her family. The Bloomfield police investigated, searching, questioning those close to her, and tracing phone calls, but they couldn't find her. Months went by, and authorities hit dead ends and followed leads that led nowhere. The case of Danielle's disappearance seemed to stall over time. Though it was never fully closed, it alternated between periods of activity and inactivity, always waiting for new information that might help locate the missing girl. From the beginning, the police knew that Adam had known the missing teenager and that he had some kind of business relationship with Danielle's parents the year before her disappearance. Therefore, he became the prime suspect. Mobile phone records showed that Adam and Danielle had been in frequent contact before she went missing. In the days following her disappearance, the officers in charge of the case interviewed Adam twice. He told investigators that he hadn't had any contact with her since June 15, 2006, when Danielle called him asking for money. After urging Danielle to return home during that conversation, Adam claimed he emphasized that the police and her parents were desperately searching for her, but Danielle refused to comply. Despite Adam's assertions, the police continued their investigation, and in October 2006, they visited his residence to search for clues. However, since they did not have a warrant, Adam denied them entry into his home. Approximately 9 months after Danielle's disappearance, her mother discovered a diary that Danielle had left behind. Troubled by its contents, she handed it over to the authorities. She also provided several items of Danielle's clothing to the police, including a piece of underwear that appeared to have a stain that could be seminal fluid. The underwear was sent to the state forensic lab to develop a DNA profile that might offer leads for the ongoing investigation. In the diary, Danielle, who was 14 years old when she disappeared, wrote about a man she was involved with sexually, referring to him as X, according to various reports. Although Adam was not directly named, the police used the diary as evidence that Danielle had been sexually assaulted 7 months before she left home. Despite being questioned numerous times, Adam continued to deny any involvement in Danielle's disappearance. With Adam refusing to cooperate, the investigating officers obtained 2 search warrants for his residence in West Hartford, Connecticut, where he lived with his 2 partners. The warrants allowed them to collect DNA samples and other evidence relevant to the case. On June 6, 2007, around 9:30 a.m., the police prepared to enter Adam's home. By then, Danielle had been missing for almost a year, and although the authorities had not given up their search, their hope of finding her alive was dwindling, as they were well aware that the odds were against them. Once inside the 2-story house, the police noted that it was in disarray, with dirty sheets on the beds. In one of the rooms, they found what appeared to be sex toys. During the search, an officer noticed a large dresser that seemed out of place and decided to move it, revealing a small, locked room hidden behind the furniture. The police later described it as a closet. When they opened the door, they found something astonishing. Danielle was inside, alive. According to the detectives, there were no signs like bedding that indicated Danielle had been kept in that room for the entire year. However, they observed that she was extremely pale, leading them to wonder if she had been exposed to sunlight during her captivity. The police were uncertain how long she had been in the room, and Danielle remained silent. It was clear that she couldn't have opened the door from inside, and they were horrified at the thought of what might have happened if the officer hadn't moved the dresser. Though Danielle showed no visible external injuries, a thorough medical examination was still necessary. She was taken to Connecticut Children's Medical Center, where she remained under the care of child welfare officials and psychiatrists who were determining the best approach for reintegrating her into her family. Understanding the potential fragility of her mental health after what she had likely endured, the officers kept their questions to Danielle limited, though she was able to speak with investigators. Thankfully, reports indicated that Danielle seemed happy and expressed a desire to reunite with her family. Her mother stated that she was prepared to wait for her daughter's return to ensure it was done in the best possible way. It was also revealed that a 15-year-old boy named Jacob lived in the house where Danielle had been held captive. Some sources indicated that Jacob was the son of Adam and Anne, while others claimed he was Anne's son only. Jacob's case was referred to the Department of Children and Families, and he was later placed in the custody of a relative. For the alleged kidnapping of Danielle, the police made 3 arrests. Adam, 41, was charged with unlawful restraint, reckless endangerment, custodial interference, interfering with an officer, risk of injury to a minor, and forgery. Anne, 40, faced charges of conspiracy to commit reckless endangerment, conspiracy to commit custodial interference, and risk of injury to a minor. Kimberly, 26, was charged with reckless endangerment, conspiracy to commit custodial interference, risk of injury to a minor, and conspiracy to commit unlawful restraint. Initially, Adam's bail was set at $500,000, while Anne's was set at $100,000. However, as more details emerged, both bails were raised to $1 million, with Kimberly's bail set at $500,000. This was not Adam's first run-in with the law. In November 1997, he was arrested on drug-related charges, and in July and August 2003, he was sued for not paying a worker and lost the case. As more details emerged about Danielle's life in captivity, the police stated that they were investigating whether Adam had abused 3 other girls in the past. It was revealed that he hadn't been charged in the previous cases because the alleged victims had refused to testify. Although Danielle had been found safe and the suspects were apprehended, the investigation was far from over. Detectives discovered that while living with Adam, Danielle occasionally traveled out of state, often to Florida, where she adopted a new identity as the niece of Adam's common-law partner. Once she was mentally stable, Danielle provided statements revealing that she had been with Adam since her disappearance, spending nearly all of her time inside the house and not attending school for the entire year. She also mentioned that she had changed her hair color multiple times to avoid recognition and confirmed that the downstairs room, where the hidden compartment was found, had indeed served as her bedroom. The police later obtained another search warrant for the residence, and investigators gathered several boxes of evidence. Among the items seized were fishnet stockings, a pistol, taboo adult magazines, a black leather collar, and spiked bracelets. They also discovered documents related to a terminated pregnancy. In subsequent interviews, investigators questioned Danielle about her diary and whether Adam was the mysterious ex she had mentioned. She nodded in agreement. Danielle also disclosed that shortly before being discovered in the small hidden room, she had visited a location in West Hartford to terminate a pregnancy, though she refused to identify the father. However, it was clear to everyone involved, and the authorities already had the primary suspect in custody. Following Adam's arrest, police uncovered homemade adult videos of a disturbing nature, filmed with very poor quality, and initiated the difficult process of identifying the young women featured in them. Reports indicated that these videos had been uploaded online at various times. Danielle informed authorities that Adam had used her as a model for both explicit photos and videos. The police also investigated a second location where they suspected Adam had engaged in inappropriate activities with Danielle and other underage girls from the community. In July 2007, at Hartford Superior Court, Adam pleaded not guilty to charges of having a relationship with Danielle months before her disappearance. During his felony court appearance, he also pleaded not guilty to 11 counts of risk of injury to a minor. His defense attorney argued that there was no evidence of force or coercion, claiming that none of that had occurred in his client's home. Instead, he characterized the case as one involving individuals, referring to the 3 accused, who were trying to protect a young girl from physical and sexual abuse within her own family, as reported in June 2006. He further claimed that the girl had access to a cell phone, attended school, and was free to go wherever she wished, claims that Danielle herself had contradicted earlier. In response, the prosecution challenged the defendants' portrayal of themselves as concerned individuals rescuing Danielle from abusive parents. They reminded the court that the evidence suggested Danielle had been exploited to produce adult content. The attorney representing Danielle's parents dismissed the defense's claims that Danielle had been abused at home and found refuge in Adam's residence as a complete fabrication. The police also disputed the defense's narrative, revealing that Danielle had informed them that the accusations against her family had been fabricated and exaggerated by Adam. She admitted that she didn't want to make such statements because her parents didn't deserve them, but Adam had pressured her, and she complied out of fear of his anger. The prosecutors further asserted that Adam had repeatedly assaulted Danielle and coerced her into terminating a pregnancy resulting from these heinous acts. They also presented various DNA evidence obtained from clothing found in Adam's home, which confirmed the dark activities that had taken place there. In December 2007, a team of forensic experts determined that Adam was unable to comprehend the legal proceedings or assist in his defense. As a result, the judge declared him temporarily incompetent to stand trial. The judge ordered that Adam be transferred to the Forensic Division of the Connecticut Valley Hospital for a 60-day evaluation period, during which he could receive treatment. At the conclusion of this evaluation in February 2008, an expert testified to the judge that Adam was capable of understanding the charges against him and could assist in his defense. In addition to facing charges related to Danielle's case, Adam was hit with another kidnapping charge after a woman came forward claiming that she had been a 15-year-old runaway in 1998 when Adam abused her multiple times while she lived in his home and worked at his business. Since the statute of limitations on the potential sexual assault charge had expired, the prosecution could only pursue a kidnapping charge in the new case. As a result, Adam faced up to 160 years in prison for the charges connected to Danielle's disappearance and the 1998 case. After insisting on his innocence for an extended period, Adam, then 42, surprised everyone in March 2008 by admitting his responsibility in the crimes. He reached a plea deal with the prosecution, pleading guilty to 8 charges, including second-degree sexual assault, kidnapping, risk of injury to a minor, and conspiracy. The prosecution recommended a sentence of 30 years in prison, followed by 20 years of probation. The judge indicated that the prison term would be at least 20 years. The sentencing hearing took place on July 11, 2008. The victim impact statement on behalf of Danielle, who was 16 at the time, was read in court. In it, Danielle directly addressed Adam, accusing him of hurting her more than anyone else ever had and expressing her hatred for him because of it. She added that she felt ruined inside in many ways and no longer knew how to distinguish between what was real and what was a lie. Adam exercised his right to address the court before hearing his sentence. He stood up and read a handwritten statement, looking directly at Danielle as he apologized. He said he was ashamed of himself, filled with regret, and added that there was nothing he could say to change the past. Ultimately, Adam was sentenced to 50 years in prison, followed by 20 years of probation. He would be required to register as a sex offender upon his release. The judge remarked that he could not determine whether Adam had a distorted view of reality or was truly evil, but ultimately said that the distinction didn't matter, as the community was not safe with him in it. On the same day, the sentencing of Anne, 41, and Kimberly, 27, was also scheduled. In tearful statements before the court, friends and family members described Anne and Kimberly as kind souls who were also victims, dominated and controlled by Adam. They asked the court for leniency, acknowledging that both women had committed crimes, made poor decisions, and showed a lack of judgment. Anne and Kimberly also apologized to Danielle in court. Kimberly expressed relief at being arrested because it removed her from what she called a destructive environment. The judge acknowledged the difficulty in determining their sentences, but ultimately concluded that on the spectrum between being Adam's victims or accomplices, or both, they were more victims. However, he recognized that they deserved to pay a price for their involvement in the crimes. Each was sentenced to 10 years in prison, suspended after 3 years, followed by 5 years of probation. After being missing for a year and undergoing a near-miraculous recovery, Danielle Kramer was able to resume a normal life despite the trauma she had endured, and the perpetrators of her suffering received the punishment they deserved. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. In the early hours of March 2nd, 2018, the peaceful night at the Shaughnessy home was suddenly broken. The alarm system, turned off remotely, left the house exposed as two people quietly slipped in through a side window. The family dogs, sensing something was wrong, started barking loudly, waking up Ted Shaughnessy. Still groggy but determined to protect his family, he grabbed a gun and headed towards the kitchen. But before he could fully understand what was happening, a figure appeared from the shadows and gunshots rang out through the house. Theodore Shaughnessy was born on February 7, 1963, in Los Angeles, California. He was one of three children born to Teresa and David Shaughnessy, with his brothers Thomas and Timothy completing the family. Although not much is known about Theodore's early years, it's widely recognized that even as a teenager, he was known for being kind, caring, and easy to talk to on almost any topic. He had a deep concern for the well-being of his loved ones. After finishing high school, Theodore became interested in the booming gem and jewelry business in California. He enrolled in specialized training programs offered by the American Gem Society, eventually earning his certification as a jeweler. In the mid-1980s, during a trip to Phoenix, Theodore met a young woman named Corey in a game arcade. Corey, born in 1966 in the small town of Wickenburg, Arizona, had a passion for painting, which led her to pursue a degree in fine arts. She dedicated herself almost exclusively to painting the desert landscapes that surrounded and inspired her. After their initial conversation, Theodore and Corey discovered a shared interest in jewelry design and creation. Their romance quickly blossomed, and Theodore soon moved to Arizona to be closer to her. Under Theodore's influence, Corey began studying gem classification, and together they dreamed of opening their own business. While waiting for their dream to become a reality, Theodore worked at local pawn shops, and once Corey completed her degree, she joined him. In 1988, the couple married, and a few years later, having honed their skills and gained valuable experience, they moved to Austin, Texas, to make their dream a reality. In 1995, the couple finally opened their own jewelry store. Theodore's dedication and passion were evident in every aspect of his work, whether he was on the hunt for precious stones or helping customers find the perfect piece. His patience and care in dealing with customers quickly made the shop a well-known and beloved establishment in the area, earning Theodore a reputation as a generous and kind-hearted individual. Thanks to their financial success, the couple accumulated a net worth of around $6 million, allowing them to build an impressive home on the outskirts of the city. Despite their success, one thing was missing: a family. For reasons not publicly known, the couple chose to adopt rather than have biological children. After completing the necessary paperwork, they received the joyful news in early 2000 that a child was waiting for them in Ukraine, The trip to meet the child was filled with nervous anticipation, but as soon as they saw the little boy, Theodore and Corey felt a sense of peace. His name was Nicholas, and he was 16 months old. Nearly 2 years later, the family of three returned to Austin, Texas, having fulfilled their dream of becoming parents. Nicholas quickly proved to be intelligent and curious, always eager to learn about the world around him. Like his parents, he developed a love for animals, leading the family to adopt 2 dogs. Theodore, who had taken up racing cars for fun, soon brought Nicholas along to the tracks, and the boy quickly shared his father's enthusiasm. As time passed, Nicholas learned to drive with Theodore's guidance, spending countless hours practicing on a go-kart track. His interests also extended to martial arts, where he eventually earned a black belt in karate. As Nicholas entered high school, he developed a fascination with finance and luxury goods, an unusual interest for someone his age. By then, he had achieved his black belt in karate and frequently discussed financial matters with his 2 closest friends, Spencer and Tyler. However, Nicholas's constant need to show off his wealth and possessions made others uncomfortable, including his friends. Despite this, he won the heart of a young girl named Jacqueline, who had moved to Austin from New Jersey after her parents' divorce. Jacqueline and Nicholas started dating, and in 2016, Nicholas introduced her to his family. Although the evening began somewhat awkwardly by the end of dinner, Theodore and Corey were charmed by Jacqueline. Due to the physical abuse Jacqueline suffered at the hands of her father, she found refuge in the home of her boyfriend and his parents. Once Corey learned the reasons for Jacqueline's extended stays, she allowed her to move in with them, and the young couple took up residence in a room on the ground floor of the house. Corey, always nurturing, did her best to care for Jacqueline, and even gifted her a beautiful diamond pendant for her 19th birthday, in keeping with the family's love for gemstones. As Nicholas neared the end of high school, his obsession with making money only grew stronger. He even wrote a detailed article for the school newspaper outlining a plan to get rich by working from home in the stock market. In July 2017, after graduating from high school, his mother agreed to loan him $30,000 to start his own business. A month later, Nicholas and Jacqueline moved into an apartment complex in College Station, about 2 hours east of Austin. Shortly afterward, with the help of Spencer, who had become an ordained minister, the young couple secretly married. Jacqueline focused on her university studies while Nicholas worked from home as a stockbroker. As their social circle expanded, Nicholas never missed an opportunity to brag about his supposedly successful business ventures. In reality, however, things were not going well and he was actually losing money. He borrowed $2,600 from a neighbor, promising to repay her with the profits from his investments. At the same time, Nicholas had to take out other loans that quickly came due, pushing his financial situation to a critical point by early 2018. When Jacqueline learned of their financial troubles, the couple argued and began discussing options to turn things around. What started as a joke about inheriting Theodore and Corey's fortune soon turned into a serious plan. After all, if they were no longer around, Nicholas would be the sole heir to a $2 million life insurance policy, plus an additional $6 million from the business and property. A few days later, the idea morphed into a real project, and the couple even agreed to hire someone to eliminate Theodore and Corey. The first person Nicholas approached for the job was his friend Spencer, but despite offering him $50,000, Spencer refused outright. The couple's initial failures did not deter their determination. On the contrary, by mid-February 2018, Nicholas turned to social media to continue his search for someone willing to carry out their dark plan. He contacted a woman who worked at the complex where he lived, offering her extra money. When she inquired about the nature of the work, he proposed that she kill 2 people in exchange for $20,000 per victim. The woman never responded again, and like the neighbor who had loaned him money, her identity has remained undisclosed for safety reasons. Nicholas faced similar rejection from a third individual he approached with the offer. Unwilling to give up, on Friday, February 23, 2018, he visited a local bar and struck up a conversation with Johnny Leon, a 21-year-old with a criminal record for drug offenses. After introducing himself and explaining the job, Nicholas offered Johnny $100,000, with payment to be made in installments. As they discussed the details, Nicholas texted Jacqueline to share the good news. When she asked about the cost, he brushed off her concerns. That night, Johnny and Nicholas agreed to meet later at Nicholas's house to finalize the plan. On Monday, February 26, 2018, Corey called her son to ask why he had not yet repaid the loan she had given him. The uncomfortable conversation quickly escalated into an argument, leaving Nicholas feeling even more pressured to achieve his goal. On the morning of Wednesday, February 28, 2018, before meeting with Nicholas, Johnny invited his friend Cameron Bosmek, who worked at a local company, to help with what he described as a moving job. Cameron, unsuspecting of anything nefarious, agreed. When Cameron and Johnny arrived at Nicholas's home, they were caught on the security cameras. Once inside, Nicholas revealed the true nature of the plan. He explained that he would deactivate the security alarm remotely from his phone to allow them access to his parents' home. They were to enter through a window in one of the rooms, where they would find a gun in a drawer. Nicholas offered Cameron $10,000 payable in 3 installments, but as soon as the words were out of his mouth, Cameron walked out, refusing to be part of the plan. Later that day, back home with his family, Cameron confided in his wife about the unsettling incident. Meanwhile, left alone with Johnny, Nicholas offered to accompany him on the mission. That night, they drove to Austin, but after several hours, Nicholas realized he couldn't go through with it, and they returned to College Station. The following day, Johnny introduced Nicholas to Ariane Smith, a 23-year-old who had recently been released from prison after serving time for drug-related offenses. Despite his criminal past, Ariane was willing to join the plan. Nicholas laid out the details again, and they agreed to carry out the attack on March 2, 2018. On Thursday, March 1, 2018, Theodore and Corey finished their usual workday at the jewelry store. After dinner, they went to bed as usual. Meanwhile, Johnny and Ariane exchanged numerous messages, preparing for the task ahead. They met up and drove to Austin, arriving at around 4:30 a.m. Once Nicholas remotely deactivated the alarms, the 2 intruders entered the house. Following Nicholas's instructions, Ariane retrieved the gun from the designated drawer. However, the family dogs, alerted by the intruders' movements, began barking, waking Theodore and Corey. Still groggy from sleep, Theodore grabbed a gun and headed to the kitchen. Ariane, reacting quickly, fired several shots, hitting Theodore and causing him to collapse. In the chaos, one of the intruders also shot one of the family dogs. The noise from the gunfire prompted Corey to grab her gun. She positioned herself in the doorway of the bedroom and fired down the hallway, determined to defend her home, even though she couldn't see the intruders. Her actions, though they didn't injure the attackers, were enough to scare them off. They fled the scene, leaving Corey to take refuge in a closet where she called emergency services. It was nearly 5 a.m. when the police arrived, delayed because they initially went to the wrong address. During those agonizing minutes, Corey remained on the line with the 911 operator. When the operator finally instructed her to leave the closet and open the door for the officers, Both Corey and the police were confronted with the horrific aftermath of the attack on Theodore. He was pronounced dead at 5:14 a.m., and through tears, Corey called her son to inform him of what had happened. As Nicholas and Jacqueline began their drive to Austin, the medical examiner determined that Theodore had died from multiple gunshot wounds. Meanwhile, the detectives initiated the investigation. What struck the detectives the most was the sheer number of bullet holes, both in the walls and scattered across the floor. They were able to reconstruct the attack with precision. Additionally, since only a side window was slightly ajar, they concluded that the intruders had likely used that window as their point of entry. Corey informed them that the window led to her son's former bedroom, prompting the detectives to search the room. In a dresser, they found an empty gun case. Immediately, they wondered if the missing gun had been used in the attack. Corey reported that nothing else was missing from the house and that she hadn't seen the intruders' faces. However, she suspected they knew about her and her husband's line of work. When Nicholas and Jacqueline arrived in Austin around 8 a.m., the detectives noticed Nicholas's unusual lack of concern. Their suspicions grew when, despite not knowing the full details of what had happened, Nicholas went straight to check the window in his old bedroom. A few minutes later, Nicholas, his mother, and his wife went to the police station to answer the detectives' questions. It was then that Nicholas recounted how he had learned about the incident. After Nicholas informed investigators that he had not been in the city for about a month, he handed over his cell phone. During their examination of the device, the officers discovered an app that allowed remote access to the family home's alarm system. When questioned about this, Corey explained that the alarm access was shared among all family members, but noted that it hadn't been activated that night. However, a review of the system's history revealed that the alarm had been deactivated at the exact time the intruders broke in, raising suspicions. Jacqueline corroborated her husband's story, stating that they had stayed home that night. Following these initial statements, all three were informed that they would undergo gunshot residue tests. Jacqueline's sudden nervousness caught the attention of the investigators, sparking further doubts. Meanwhile, at the crime scene, evidence collection continued, and due to the case's complexity, the district attorney was brought in to assist. She quickly began to suspect that Theodore might have known his attacker. As no fingerprints belonging to the family members were found, suspicions began to shift toward Corey. To make matters worse, Corey's decision to forego a funeral and her request to clean the house as soon as possible only fueled the investigators' doubts. While waiting for the case to be resolved, she closed the jewelry store and had her husband's remains cremated. On the same day, as his mother struggled to cope with her grief, Nicholas exchanged text messages with Spencer. He asked if Spencer wanted to see photos of the crime scene, boasting that the investigators had returned his phone, a clear sign, in his view, that he was no longer a suspect. When Corey was called in for another interview, the questioning was so intense that she began to feel as though she was no longer being treated as a victim. By then, however, she wasn't the only one under scrutiny. Her son had not been entirely ruled out as a suspect. On March 5, 2018, police officers began interviewing neighbors at Nicholas's apartment complex. This led them to the employee Nicholas had contacted via social media, who then revealed the details of his disturbing proposal. A few days later, armed with a search warrant, officers searched Nicholas and Jacqueline's apartment. They found ammunition matching the bullets recovered from the victim's body, as well as a marriage certificate exposing the secret wedding. They also seized a computer. When Corey learned of her son's secret marriage, she was at a loss for words. She reproached Nicholas for not doing things the right way, assuring him that there was no need to hide the marriage and that, had she known, she would have organized a proper wedding. As a result, Nicholas and Jacqueline moved back into the family home. Despite the mounting suspicions against him, Corey remained convinced of her son's innocence. Determined to support him, on March 10, 2018, Corey hired a group of attorneys and even handed over control of the jewelry store to Nicholas. Over the next month and into the following, the evidence against Nicholas began to pile up at an alarming rate. First, phone records revealed that, contrary to his initial statement, Nicholas had been in the city 2 days before the incident that claimed his father's life. Then, more incriminating text messages exchanged between him and Jacqueline surfaced. In May 2018, after locating Spencer, the detectives interviewed him at the station. Without much pressure, Spencer disclosed the amount Nicholas expected to inherit by eliminating his parents. He also provided text messages to support his claims, which cleared him of any suspicion. By the end of that month, Nicholas and Jacqueline were arrested. Both were charged with criminal solicitation to commit capital murder. Nicholas's bail was set at $3 million and Jacqueline's at $1 million. Faced with sworn statements and overwhelming evidence, Corey finally grasped the full extent of the nightmare she was living. Meanwhile, authorities hoped that time behind bars would lead the suspects to reveal the name of the actual killer. However, as neither showed any signs of cooperation, the officers prepared to take further action. During the first week of July 2018, one of the detectives meticulously reviewed the security camera footage from Nicholas and Jacqueline's home, focusing specifically on the days leading up to the crime. To his surprise, he discovered an image of Nicholas greeting 2 men at the front door. One of the men was wearing a shirt with the logo of a local company. Following this lead, the detective visited the company and learned that the man was Cameron, whose address he quickly obtained. A couple of hours later, when the detective arrived at Cameron's residence, his wife immediately knew the reason for the visit. Although Cameron wasn't home at the time, she shared what she knew and provided Johnny's name to the detective. On Wednesday, July 11, 2018, when Johnny was brought in for questioning at the station, he offered little resistance. It quickly became apparent to the detectives that they had found the accomplice they were looking for. Johnny was arrested and charged with capital murder. Further investigation revealed incriminating text messages exchanged between Johnny and Arian just hours before the crime, indicating that Johnny had not acted alone. Finding Arian, however, proved challenging, but he was finally apprehended on December 10, 2018. During his interrogation, Arian detailed the events of that night, breaking down as the questions continued. He expressed remorse for the tragedy his actions had caused and eventually admitted to being the one who fired the shot that killed Theodore. He also directed the detectives to where they could find the missing weapon, which turned out to be one of Nicholas's guns. Jacqueline, meanwhile, admitted that she had been aware of her husband's intentions from the start. Her cooperation earned her a reduced bail. With all the pieces in place for a trial, the district attorney initially planned to seek the death penalty for Nicholas. However, in the spring of 2021, the district attorney left her position, and her successor quickly offered plea deals to the 3 defendants. The deal allowed them to plead guilty to a reduced charge of murder in exchange for a 35-year sentence with the possibility of parole. In the end, all 3 accepted the offer. Jacqueline, who by that time was divorced, also agreed to plead guilty to attempted solicitation of capital murder, hoping for a more lenient sentence. In a virtual hearing held on April 7, 2021, the judge sentenced Nicholas and Arian to 35 years in prison. A week later, Johnny Leon received an identical sentence for the same crime. On June 20, 2023, Jacqueline was sentenced to 4 months in jail, 10 years of probation, and 300 hours of community service. Additionally, her passport was revoked, and she was prohibited from leaving the state of Texas without first informing her probation officers. As part of her sentence, the court ordered that Jacqueline serve 2 days in jail every year on the anniversary of Theodore's death. Corey, unable to attend the hearing, recorded a message that was played in court at the end of the session as her victim impact statement. In later interviews, Corey reflected on how Nicholas and Jacqueline had shattered a part of her world, taking away what she loved most. With remarkable strength, she set out to overcome the cruel loss of her husband and the devastating betrayal by her son, with whom she never spoke again. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. In June 1995 at 3:45 a.m., a 34-year-old mother and her 11-year-old daughter, Lacey, were reported missing by their family. Unbeknownst to them, a serial killer was prowling the area, successfully eluding capture. A police officer, examining the mother's office and documenting the scene with photographs, discovered Lacey. She was tied to a chair, her head bowed and seemingly lifeless. However, while taking another photograph, something unexpected happened.
When I started to take the photograph, she kind of turned and looked up at me. It's kind of like seeing someone rise from the dead.
I woke up, I heard, and I thought, is there someone taking pictures? And I turned my head. And when I did, I heard a man say, "This one's alive."
The enigma surrounding Lacey, her mother, and the other victims of this serial killer lingered unresolved until the little girl in the photograph was found alive. Her survival offered a glimmer of hope and a crucial lead in unraveling the truth. Mary Phillips was born in 1961 in Bradford, a small town in Arkansas. During her high school years, she met James Phillips, her lifelong love. They started dating at that time and eventually married. Mary became a devoted wife and mother to 3 children. Their first child, Darla, was born in 1979, followed by Jessie 2 years later, and their youngest daughter, Lacey, was born in 1984. The Phillips family spent several years living in Hope before moving in 1990 to the quaint town of Bald Knob, also in Arkansas. Mary was known for her deep religious beliefs and was regarded by those who knew her as a wonderful person with a radiant smile that could light up any room. Professionally, Mary trained as an accountant and worked at a tax office. In her free time, she enjoyed spending time with her family, gardening, and engaging in outdoor activities. On June 6, 1995, at the age of 34, Mary went to work as usual while her husband was away on a business trip. That afternoon, Darla dropped off her younger sister Lacey, who was 11 at the time, at their mother's office since Mary was supposed to take Lacey to a dentist appointment after work. Darla then left to attend a friend's birthday party, kissing her mother goodbye and telling her she loved her. Later that evening, Jesse, the Phillips' second child, grew worried when neither his mother nor Lacey had returned home. He called his father, who was out of town. James instructed his son to check if Mary had been in an accident nearby. Jesse followed his father's advice but could not find her. James then asked Jesse to stay at home, believing Mary might return at any moment. As the night progressed and there was still no sign of Mary and Lacey, James's concern grew, leading him to contact the police to report his wife and daughter missing since 3 p.m. the previous day. Upon receiving the report, 3 police officers went to Mary's workplace. In the parking lot, they found a lone truck parked beside the building, which was registered to Mary. One of the officers entered the office and discovered Mary dead, with her hands bound behind her back and naked from the waist down. The officer immediately alerted his colleagues, who began their investigation by noticing drag marks leading to the bathroom door. Upon opening it, they found Lacey tied to a chair and brutally beaten. The officers initially believed the girl might have also died due to her severe condition. A detective who was photographing the crime scene captured an image with a flash where Lacey was lying. To his astonishment, Lacey turned her head and looked directly at him. Her brown hair, matted and darkened by blood, covered the right side of her face. Despite her grave injuries, Lacey had survived for about 10 hours tied up. She asked about her mother, and the detective could only reassure her to stay calm and try to rest until the ambulance arrived. He was struck by the child's bravery. Lacey had to pass by her mother's body to leave the office and was urgently taken to a nearby hospital for treatment. She had severe head injuries that required surgery and a stay in the intensive care unit. Meanwhile, the police contacted James, urging him to return home immediately. He packed his bags and drove back, unaware of the details of the situation. Once Lacey's condition stabilized, she was able to describe her attacker, providing details about his appearance, clothing, hairstyle, and tattoos, one on his arm and another resembling a tear under his left eye. Her description was crucial in helping the police identify the suspect as Jack Johnson, Jr., a man known to them due to multiple previous arrests for burglary, theft, and drug use. Detectives then went to question him. A state police investigator interviewed Jack, who was 30 years old at the time. Surprisingly, Jack confessed to the crime without any pressure, detailing his actions. At one point, he even mentioned that if he could, he would take the investigator's gun and end his life right there. His demeanor during the interrogation and the chilling details he provided about the attack made it evident to the officers that Jack had acted with absolute cold-bloodedness. Jack claimed that his actions were motivated by revenge and anger because his wife had been sexually assaulted, and the police had not thoroughly investigated the incident. However, there is no precise information about when or to whom Jack was married, nor about the incident he referred to. According to the detective's investigation, on that fateful day, June 6, 1995, Jack saw Mary enter the building where she worked while he was painting a sign nearby. Later, when Lacey was already in the office with her mother, he decided to enter. Some sources say he used the excuse of looking for a job, while others claim he asked to borrow some accounting books, after which he left. However, he returned that same day with a gun, latex gloves, and wire. Jack forced Mary to lie face down on the floor and made Lacey do the same on top of her mother before robbing the cash register. He then tied their hands with wire and took Lacey to a bathroom, where he strapped her to a chair. The little girl pleaded with him not to hurt her mother, to which he responded by saying he would harm her instead. He then struck Lacey at least 8 times on the head with the gun, causing her to lose consciousness. Jack returned to the room where Mary was, struck her on the head, and sexually assaulted her. Mary fought back with all her might, but Jack overpowered her by strangling her with his hands. He then wrapped the coffee maker's electrical cord around her body until she stopped breathing. Meanwhile, Lacey regained consciousness and, realizing she was injured, began calling out for her mother. Jack went back to the bathroom and choked Lacey until she passed out again. She was gravely injured with multiple fractures and barely clinging to life. Believing the child had died, Jack left her in the small room and fled the scene. But who was this man capable of committing such a heinous act? Jack was born on August 10, 1964, in Toledo, Ohio. His father was an alcoholic and his mother had gambling problems. Jack was one of 7 siblings but had a particularly close relationship with the youngest, who was a year and a half younger than him. Jack suffered a high fever and seizures when he was just a year old. He was later diagnosed with attention deficit disorder, and at the age of 5, he began taking Ritalin as part of his treatment. Around this time, he also started experiencing hallucinations. It was also revealed that Jack suffered physical and sexual abuse as a child and was said to exhibit 2 personalities. On one hand, he could be a loving and affectionate child who enjoyed drawing and telling stories. On the other hand, he could become filled with rage and react violently, often lashing out at family members. As he grew older, Jack began acting violently towards animals, killing several of them. He also got into numerous troubles with the police and was eventually placed in a juvenile detention center. There, he was diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, antisocial behavior, and a tendency to bang his head against cabinets. At a young age, Jack became addicted to alcohol and other drugs, seemingly as a way to escape the pain he had endured. This cocktail of abuse, illness, and substance use made Jack a man unable to control his life. Physically, Jack was distinguished by a series of tattoos, including hearts and barbed wire on his arms and wrists. In 1985, Jack had a daughter with a woman whose details remain unknown. The child was put up for adoption and raised in Toledo by a family that provided her with a comfortable and protected life. Jack was a tormented man who attempted suicide twice, once in 1989 and again in 1991 when he jumped off a bridge. In 1995, he voluntarily admitted himself to a mental health center, reporting suicidal thoughts. After evaluation, experts diagnosed him with bipolar disorder. According to case reviews, he used methamphetamines to cope with this mental illness, which causes extreme mood swings, from euphoria and irritability to depression. These changes can affect sleep, energy, activity levels, judgment, behavior, and clarity of thought. Bipolar disorder is a lifelong condition that can be managed with treatment, typically involving medication and psychological support. After seeking help at the mentioned institution, Jack left after 6 days, although the circumstances of his departure are unclear. 6 months after his brief stay at the mental health center, Jack committed the horrific attack that took the life of a loving mother and left 3 children motherless, and James without the love of his life. A few days after Jack's arrest, a preliminary hearing was held at the county circuit court. During Jack's trial, the district attorney sought the death penalty, arguing that Jack was a dangerous man likely to commit another violent crime. Reports indicated that during one of the hearings, Jack himself asked to be executed immediately. One of the key witnesses, Investigator Howard, recounted Jack's detailed confession of the crime. Additionally, evidence was presented, including the photograph taken of Lacey at the crime scene when officers initially believed she had died from the beating Jack inflicted. Another significant moment was when Lacey, who had survived the attack, took the witness stand and identified Jack as the perpetrator. Jack pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, expressing deep remorse for his actions and stating that he was haunted by the ghosts of his victims. He claimed he could not forgive himself and would willingly give up his life if it could undo the harm he caused. On April 17, 1996, the jury delivered its verdict. Jack was found guilty. He was sentenced to death for murdering Mary Phillips, received a life sentence for sexually assaulting her, and an additional 30 years for the attempted murder of Laci Phillips, along with a $15,000 fine. In the years following, Jack's defense team filed numerous appeals against his conviction, focusing on mitigating evidence and the legality of Arkansas's death penalty laws. The attorneys argued that they were not allowed to present critical evidence to the jury that could have mitigated the sentence, such as reports confirming his bipolar disorder and constant hallucinations. They also pointed out that only $6,400 had been spent on his defense, whereas a comprehensive investigation would typically cost tens of thousands of dollars. Additionally, they relied on an expert who was later deemed incompetent by the state medical board. Meanwhile, the Phillips family struggled to adjust to life without Mary. Darla took on the role of an improvised mother, cleaning the house, preparing meals, and taking care of Laci and Jesse. While awaiting execution on Arkansas's death row, Jack's genetic profile was entered into the National DNA Database. This eventually led to the revelation of dark secrets from his past. In 2002, a detective reopened the case of Lorraine Ann Barrett, a 32-year-old woman from Bridgeville, Pennsylvania, who was murdered in June 1991. Lorraine, known as Laurie, graduated in 1977 from South Fayette High School and worked as a customer service representative for a telephone company in Washington, Pennsylvania. She was on vacation in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, when she met her assailant at a bar where she was last seen. Witnesses reported that a man with multiple tattoos accompanied her to her room at the Days Inn Lauderdale South Motel. Once in the room, the man beat her, assaulted her, and strangled her to death before fleeing. In the early hours of June 1, 1991, a maintenance worker found Laurie's body in her hotel room. The police were immediately notified, and an investigation began to identify the attacker. Authorities created a composite sketch of the suspect, describing a man with several tattoos, including barbed wire and hearts with names. This information was distributed throughout the county. When Jack's sister saw the description and sketch of the man wanted for the murder of a woman, she immediately thought it resembled her brother. Although she didn't believe Jack was guilty and thought it was a case of mistaken identity, she still told their father. He advised her not to tell their mother. Subsequently, their father put Jack on a bus to Arkansas. Despite their efforts, the police could not locate the culprit, and the case quickly went cold. 12 years after Laurie's death, the case was reopened. The detectives sent fluid samples collected from Laurie's body and the crime scene to be compared with databases that hadn't existed when the crime occurred. The following year, the system found a match with Jack's DNA archived in Arkansas. Based on this result, a second test was conducted at the State Forensic Laboratory, conclusively proving that Jack had committed the crime against Laurie. It was also determined that his tattoos and features matched those of the suspect who had murdered the tourist in Fort Lauderdale. Florida authorities then issued an extradition order for Jack, who was at that time in maximum security prison in Arkansas, appealing his sentence for the third time after being condemned to death. Jack would now face justice again on charges of first-degree murder and sexual assault in Broward County. Once in Fort Lauderdale, Jack met the detective who was handling Laurie's case. To the detective, it was evident that Jack was a serial killer. He earned Jack's trust, leading to Jack's confession that he had killed another person in Broward County. Although Jack didn't provide the victim's name, he promised that he would reveal his secret someday. A similar situation occurred between Jack and his sister during one of her prison visits. She asked if there were other victims, and he admitted there was one more but didn't give any details, promising to explain everything in a letter when the time came. For Lori's family, discovering after so long who had taken her life was both a shock and a relief. Her sister stated that it was the news she had always wanted to hear, but learning about it this way was overwhelming because it was so unexpected. Finally, in 2005, Jack was tried for Lori's murder. He pleaded guilty and was sentenced to life imprisonment. He was then returned to Arkansas to await his execution. A couple of years later, Jack's defense continued to seek clemency. His lawyer argued in a hearing that the jury forms in Jack's trial contained contradictory information and pointed out that such ambiguities were typically resolved with new sentencing hearings ordered by the Supreme Court. He also argued that Jack's bipolar disorder had not been adequately presented to the jury, explaining that while it didn't excuse his actions, it did offer an explanation. Despite the clemency hearings not succeeding, Jack's execution was postponed multiple times over the years. Among other reasons, this was due to various illnesses he suffered, including high blood pressure and diabetes, which eventually led to the amputation of his leg. In parallel, in 2010, Jack's biological daughter wanted to learn about her biological parents. She filed a petition with a probate court to disclose her birth certificate, which had her mother's contact information. She called her mother and discovered that her father was Jack, a man on death row in Arkansas. As a single mother of two, she struggled to process this reality. She was shocked, filled with guilt and confusion about the man who had fathered her, but also grateful for the family that had raised her. Feeling compelled to reach out, she wrote a letter to Jack in prison. Soon after, she began receiving boxes of Jack's writings and paintings he had made for her two young children. While she knew Jack deserved to be in prison for his crimes, she also felt that he had changed. Jack's execution was scheduled for November 14, 2015, but it was suspended due to legal challenges related to the drugs used in the execution procedures. In 2017, the state of Arkansas decided to resume executions, and among those scheduled was Jack. In April of that year, a new clemency hearing was held, but Jack refused to attend, opting instead to send a handwritten letter to the state parole board for his lawyer to read. In the letter, he expressed regret not only for his actions but also for the hearing itself, stating he was ready to face death at the hands of the state. He forgave his executioners, acknowledging someone had to carry out his sentence. Jack made it clear that he would reject any commutation from a death sentence to life imprisonment, as he refused to spend any more time in what he described as a rat hole prison. He felt he had no right to seek forgiveness and was tormented by his actions toward Mary and her daughter, attributing his crimes to years of mental illness, abuse, drugs, and poor decisions. Jack's lawyer highlighted his shame and remorse. During the hearing, Lacey, who by then was 32 years old and married, declared that she didn't want to live another day knowing Jack was still alive. She expressed frustration that more than 20 years after the incident, justice had yet to be served. For the Phillips family, the delays in Jack's execution had been a torturous journey, preventing closure for the horrors Mary and Lacey endured. After 21 years on death row, Jack prepared to face his sentence and declared himself ready to die. He gave his sister a letter written in 2006, instructing her to open it a year after his execution date. Jack's biological daughter traveled to Arkansas to see her father for the first and last time, the day before his execution. They held hands, tried to maintain a cheerful attitude, forgave each other for past hurts, and reminisced about her birth. Jack gave his daughter his wedding ring, which she now wears on a chain around her neck. On April 24, 2017, Jack consumed his last meal: fried chicken, potato wedges with tartar sauce, beef jerky, 3 candy bars, and a chocolate shake. Around 7 p.m., he gave a 2-minute final statement apologizing to Laci, expressing disbelief at how he had hurt her, and professing his love for her as if she were his own daughter. He added that he hoped in time they could understand who he truly was and that he was not a monster. In a controversial statement, he implied there was a reason for the tragic events of that fateful day. He also left a written note stating that he aimed to become a better person in prison, practicing Buddhism and studying physics, and that no words could fully convey his remorse. At 52 years old, Jack was executed alongside another death row inmate, Marcel Williams, marking the first double execution in the United States in 17 years. His death was pronounced at 7 p.m., making him the 1,450th person executed in the U.S. since 1976. Mary's husband, James, lamented the long wait for justice, but felt relief at its eventual achievement. He also expressed sympathy for Jack's family during their ordeal. Jack's sister stated she felt pain for the victims and prayed for them constantly, acknowledging Jack needed to be punished for his unforgivable acts. However, she also remembered him as a loving child and wanted to be present at his execution to support him, though the Arkansas Department of Correction denied her request. A year after Jack's execution, his sister opened the letter he had given her. The 4-page letter, he confessed in detail to the murder of Regina Harrison, providing details only the killer would know. Jack wanted Regina's family to know the truth, claiming her spirit had visited and haunted him for 3 years until he confessed. He described Regina's initial anger and longing for her parents, but said she eventually understood him and forgave him, although he could never forgive himself. He expressed deep remorse and stated he could not rest in peace until Regina's family knew what had happened. Jack instructed his sister to send the letter to the police. In November 2018, she sent it to the Broward police, leading to Regina's body being exhumed and her DNA analyzed, tests that were not possible in the 1980s when the crime occurred. In February 2019, based on the DNA results, the Broward County prosecutor officially announced that Jack was responsible for Regina's death, a crime for which another man had been convicted. In truth, Regina was Jack's first victim, a crime he committed at the age of 18. Regina, a 20-year-old college student, was kind, sweet, and deeply religious, attending Palm Beach Atlantic College, a Christian school in West Palm Beach. On May 12, 1983, Regina left her parents' house for an evening bike ride in the North Beach neighborhood of Hollywood, Florida, but never returned home. Jack spotted her while she was cycling, approached her, and decided to head to the beach. As darkness fell, he kidnapped her, took her to Westlake Park, where he stripped her, assaulted her sexually, and strangled her to death, leaving her body abandoned in the park. The next day, friends and family found Regina's naked body in the woods. During the investigation, witnesses reported seeing Regina riding her bike with a slim, long-haired man on a black bicycle along a popular trail on Hollywood Beach. Authorities created a sketch of the suspect based on the description. For 5 months, there were no leads until Detective John Curcio, previously mentioned, saw a television program about the crime. He was part of the unit that captured Ronald Henry Stewart, a serial sexual assailant who had terrorized women in Florida and Mississippi in the late 1980s. Curcio realized that Ronald matched the suspect's sketch, slim, long-haired and riding a black bicycle when arrested. A witness who had seen Regina and her alleged attacker at the beach identified Ronald as the man with Regina from a photo lineup. Additionally, an acquaintance of Ronald claimed he had confessed to killing a woman in the park. Soon, Ronald was charged with Regina's murder. Despite several factors suggesting Ronald's innocence, including non-matching fingerprints at the crime scene, he pled guilty to avoid the death penalty. He admitted to 3 counts of sexual assault with a deadly weapon in Broward County in exchange for prosecutors dropping charges in 6 other cases. Ronald was sentenced to 50 years in prison in January 1985, to be served concurrently with his other sentences for sexual offenses. He never regretted the plea deal nor claimed any coercion in accepting it. Ronald Henry Stewart served most of his time in Mississippi, but was transferred to Florida in 2007, where he died of cancer the following year. Jack's confession to Regina's murder proved Ronald had no connection to the case. Following this revelation, prosecutor Paula McMahon announced they would work to overturn Ronald's wrongful conviction and investigate Jack's past for other potential victims in Florida and across the U.S. The story of Mary, Lacey, and the Phillips family is a grim reminder of the horrors that can lurk in the most unexpected places. It is also a testament to courage and a demonstration that the pursuit of truth and justice must never waver, as they can emerge when least expected. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. Sabora Gagani was born on September 14, 1991, in Tirana, Albania. At some point, Sabora's parents separated, and shortly afterward, her mother, Elisabetta, decided to move away with her children, relocating to Rome, Italy. There, Elisabetta worked tirelessly to raise her children on her own. Sabora was known for her cheerful disposition and quickly became popular among her school friends, who affectionately called her Sibi. She was a strikingly beautiful young woman with dark skin, tall and slender, with long, flowing hair and an energetic personality. Sabora enjoyed spending time with friends, attending parties, and listening to music at high volumes. According to her mother, she had a deep love for children and dreamed of becoming a teacher. However, she was also drawn to the world of modeling and took her first step in that direction by competing and winning a regional beauty contest. Despite her modeling aspirations, Sabora's family needed financial support, so she began working as a waitress in a local restaurant, where she quickly earned everyone's affection. Fate took a turn when Sabora was 18 years old and met Marco, a 31-year-old tall, handsome, and charming man. Although little is known about him, it was confirmed that he had at least one sister and had been previously married. By the time he met Sabora, he was divorced. Sabora fell deeply in love with Marco, and their feelings were mutual. Unbeknownst to Sabora, Marco had a troubled past. According to those close to him, Marco had a reputation with the local police due to his violent tendencies and issues with drug use. About a year into their relationship, Sabora and Marco informed her family that they had decided to move to Spain, as Marco claimed that there were not enough job opportunities for him in Italy. They planned to settle in Torremolinos, a Spanish municipality in the province of Malaga. Elisabetta was not thrilled about her young daughter moving to another country with a man significantly older than her, but Sabora was an adult, and despite her mother's concerns, the couple went ahead with their plan. Upon arriving in Torremolinos in 2011, Sabora and Marco settled in the beach area of La Carihuela. Initially, the couple appeared happy, and Sabora maintained close contact with her mother, communicating daily by phone or social media. She quickly found work as a waitress in a local restaurant, and Marco secured a job as a cook and pizza maker. However, it soon became evident that the problem was not a lack of opportunities in Italy, but Marco's inability to keep a job, as he couldn't hold down a position in Spain either. As time passed, Marco's true nature began to surface, and jealousy-fueled arguments with Sabora became increasingly frequent. Elisabetta witnessed this firsthand when she visited the couple to see how they were living. During her visit, she noticed that the relationship was deteriorating with bitter and frequent arguments, even in her presence. Over the following month, Sabora returned to Italy several times, with some reports suggesting that she only stayed in Spain during the holiday seasons. It's possible that her return was also influenced by the fact that her residence permit had expired, and she had been using a false Italian identity to travel. By late 2013, nearing the third anniversary of their relationship, Sabora returned to her mother's home and confided that she had left Marco for good. She was tired of trying to make things work and had decided not to return, realizing that the situation was not improving. But soon after, Marco showed up at the family's home, as often happens, swearing that everything would change. He even proposed marriage, and unfortunately, Sabora was swayed by his promises. Things did improve for a while, but eventually, jealousy and violence returned to dominate their relationship. Elisabetta later recalled that her daughter began to feel increasingly frightened. On one occasion, Sabora confided to her mother that if she wanted to leave Marco, she would have to disappear, as he wouldn't let her go otherwise. By June 2014, it seemed clear that any hope for reconciliation between Sabora and Marco had faded. Sabora left the house they shared and moved into an apartment. Once settled, she called her mother, telling her that she had ended things with Marco for good and that she finally felt as free as a butterfly. However, things started to become strange when, in early July, Marco called Elisabetta to ask if Sabora had returned to Italy. Surprised, Elisabetta asked what had happened, and Marco told her that 2 days earlier they had a heated argument, after which Sabora left the house, leaving all her belongings behind. Elisabetta didn't believe his story because Sabora had informed her a month earlier about her move, making it clear that Marco was lying by claiming she had just left 2 days prior. Adding to the worry during all that time, Elisabetta had received no news from her daughter. Deep down, she hoped that Sabora was following through with what she had said, leaving Marco and disappearing. But the situation took a chilling turn when, in a subsequent conversation, Marco told Elisabetta a different version of events. He claimed that a security guard at the residence had seen Sabora leaving with 2 suitcases, saying she had left without disclosing her destination. This contradicted his earlier statement that she had left without taking anything. The family waited anxiously for Sabora to make contact. They were certain that, even if she wanted to disappear from Marco's life without revealing her whereabouts, she would never completely cut off contact with her siblings, especially her mother. The last time anyone heard from her was on July 7, 2014, when she exchanged a WhatsApp message with Marco. After that, her phone was disconnected and there was no activity on her social media accounts. The following week, Marco traveled to Italy and visited Sabora's family. He shared a coffee with Elisabetta, lamenting the disappearance of his beloved, and spoke with Sabora's brother, expressing disbelief that she had left without explanation, while insisting he had no idea what could have happened to her. During this time, Marco told Elisabetta that he had printed missing person posters and had been placing them around the area. He also claimed that Sabora had been seen boarding a bus, then suggested she might have traveled to Argentina. Additionally, he mentioned hearing that she had been spotted with a dark-skinned man with whom she seemed to be arguing. However, Marco never did the most logical thing, reporting Sabora's disappearance to the authorities. That responsibility fell to Elisabetta, who not only reported her daughter missing, but also suggested that Marco might be involved. The police began an investigation, interviewing Marco as the last person to see her, but he repeated his story. The authorities confirmed that the couple had separated, though it seemed they were still in contact, as some of Sabora's personal belongings were found in the residence. This unsettling situation persisted for the following months. In 2015, in an effort to expand the search for Sabora nationwide, the authorities sought the help of the association dedicated to disseminating information and images of people who have gone missing under unexplained circumstances. Unfortunately, this effort also yielded no results. Sabora's family, however, refused to give up and ensured that Italian media also circulated information about the missing young woman. Life continued for everyone, though in very different ways. While Sabora's family lived with the anguish of not knowing her whereabouts, clinging to the increasingly faint hope that she would return, Marco's life moved on, albeit with the same bad habits. During this time, Marco changed his appearance, shaving his head, growing a beard, and entering into 2 relationships, both of which ended with the women filing complaints against him. Marco remained in Spain, where, to those around him, he appeared to be a normal man, always greeting his neighbors with a smile, a regular at the gym, a fan of target shooting, and a lover of sports like baseball and martial arts. By 2023, 9 years had passed since Sabora's disappearance, and Marco had a new partner, a woman named Paula. What was known about Paula's life was that before Marco, she had been in a stable relationship from which she had a daughter and a son. After the breakup, and once she began living with Marco, they had a child together. One thing that hadn't changed in Marco's life was his instability at work, and over the years he had gone through several jobs. While working at a pizzeria, he became friends with a man named Victor Molina. One day, Marco approached Victor, asking for work, stating that he had been unemployed for a while and that his family was struggling. Victor, willing to help, gave both Marco and Paula jobs at his restaurant, where Victor's sister Victoria had been working until then. Later, Victor even rented an apartment to the couple. Paula proved to be an excellent worker, earning the trust and affection of her employers. However, the same couldn't be said for Marco, with whom Victor had several problems. The last straw came when Victoria arrived at the restaurant one day to find the employee bathroom door completely destroyed. Paula, deeply embarrassed, admitted that Marco had broken the door, accusing her of hiding there to have intimate relations with co-workers. This incident led Victor to transfer Marco to work under his direct supervision at another place. During her time at the restaurant, Paula had earned not only trust as an employee, but also personal affection. Victoria, in particular, knew that the relationship between Marco and Paula was not just troubled, but virtually non-existent. Paula confided that Marco had physically assaulted her. Her employers urged her to report him to the authorities, knowing that with his record, he would likely end up in jail. However, Paula downplayed the incident, claiming it was just 4 punches and a kick. To her employers, this explanation was shocking, but there was an underlying reason why Paula continued living with Marco. She revealed that social services had taken her children away after finding drugs in their home that belonged to Marco. Paula confessed that she wanted to leave Marco, with whom she said she no longer had a romantic relationship, but she lacked the means to do so and needed to maintain the appearance of a stable relationship to regain custody of her children. Since securing a steady job, Paula was closer to achieving that goal. She hoped to save enough money to rent her own place and separate from Marco. She also shared that she had been undergoing weekly drug tests at a clinic for months to prove she was drug-free, and she held out hope that by October of that year, she would be reunited with her children. While Marco was working at the new establishment, his performance did not improve, and he lasted only a month and a half. Victor, the owner, discovered that a kitchen knife had gone missing, and he reported the theft to the authorities. Shortly after filing the report, Victor decided to fire Marco. Just a few days after Marco's dismissal, on Tuesday, May 16, 2023, Paula was in high spirits. It was her day off, and she had plans for the evening. The next day, Wednesday, May 17, 2014, Victoria was looking forward to hearing about Paula's night when she came in for her shift. Meanwhile, back at the apartment, Paula was getting ready for work. It was around 11:30 in the morning when loud screams were heard from the apartment shared by Marco and Paula. While it wasn't unusual for the couple to argue, there was something different about Paula's cries this time. Her voice sounded desperate, and she was pleading for help. Victor and another employee immediately rushed upstairs and began pounding on the door, asking what was happening and pleading with Paula to tell them if she was okay. One of the men claimed to have heard faint whimpers in the background. Seconds later, Marco's voice emerged, assuring them that everything was fine and that Paula had just gone back to bed. Paula's voice was no longer heard. The door remained closed, and something in Marco's tone set off alarm bells for the concerned men. Victor ran to fetch a spare key to the apartment from his house, while the other employee went to grab his phone to call the police. Hearing the men leave the door, Marco calmly exited the apartment and left the building. Minutes later, police officers and medical personnel arrived at the scene. They knocked on the door again, but there was no response. Victor unlocked the door for them, and what they found inside was far worse than anyone could have imagined. Lying on the floor was Paula's lifeless body, her clothes stained red with numerous stab wounds. The paramedics could do nothing but pronounce her dead at the scene, and it was clear that the suspected assailant was no longer present. Within minutes, the area was swarming with law enforcement, investigators, and medical personnel. Authorities immediately launched a manhunt for the suspect based on witness statements. The efforts paid off. A local resident identified Marco from the photo at a nearby establishment. Less than 6 hours after the incident, at 5:30 that same evening, Marco was apprehended while calmly drinking a beer. He offered no resistance, and the arrest attracted the attention of everyone present in the establishment and in the surrounding area. Marco was taken to the police station for questioning, while initial reports indicated that Paula had sustained 14 stab wounds to her body. In the days that followed, new details emerged, revealing the extent of Marco's manipulations. It was discovered that on the night Paula went out, Marco had been searching for her, even asking local taxi drivers for information on who had driven her and where she had gone. This was just the tip of the iceberg, as the surprises were far from over. Upon learning of Marco's arrest for the murder of his then-girlfriend, the pain of Cibora's mother, Elisabetta, resurfaced. She once again voiced the plea that had been her cry for many years. Incredibly, Elisabetta's plea was answered almost immediately. As Marco was being escorted through the police station, he stopped in front of a bulletin board displaying images from ongoing investigations. Among them was the missing person poster for Cibora Gagani, whose case had remained open for 9 years. According to the officers, upon seeing the poster, Marco paused and dropped a bombshell. He claimed he wanted to cooperate because the memory of what he had done would haunt him forever. He confessed that he and Cibora had argued, and he had killed her and buried her in an apartment. And not only that, when the officers were still reeling from the shock, Marco offered to show them where he had hidden her body in the apartment they had lived in together. The authorities, cautious of his intentions, did not accept his offer immediately. Returning to the case at hand on Saturday, May 20th, Marco, 45, was formally presented in court. He exercised his right to remain silent and only responded to questions from his defense attorney, who requested a psychiatric and toxicological evaluation for her client in connection with Paula's murder. During this hearing, Marco said nothing about his earlier revelation regarding Cibora's case. The court ordered that Marco be held in provisional custody without bail while being investigated for the crime of murder within the context of gender violence, and that he undergo a drug addiction protocol the same day. It was also noted that the court had reopened the investigation into the disappearance of Cibora Gagani, which had occurred 9 years earlier. From that moment on, investigators set out to determine the truth of Marco's statements made at the police station. Over the next few days, a massive operation was launched. On Monday, May 22nd, officers visited the apartment where Marco and Cibora had once lived. At that time, the apartment was occupied by another couple who were fully cooperative with the authorities. In the following days, specialized teams meticulously searched every inch of the apartment located near the town hall and police station where Cibora's body was allegedly hidden. The search of the apartment began with a visual inspection, looking for any irregularities in the walls or floors, but nothing out of the ordinary was discovered. Subsequent inspections involved the use of densitometers and microcameras. Small holes were drilled throughout various parts of the apartment to insert cameras and examine the interiors of the walls and floors. However, these efforts did not yield any positive results. According to the press, Marco continued to talk from prison, where he supposedly claimed that he had used acid to dispose of Cibora's remains. Meanwhile, investigators refused to give up, even after 3 fruitless searches of the apartment. During the 4th attempt, officers analyzed the building's floor plans and noticed that 2 identical apartments were located on the same floor. When they visited the twin apartment, they realized that there was a large space in the bedroom that did not match the layout of the apartment under investigation. With this clue, the specialists focused on a particular wall that appeared unaltered and was identical to the rest of the building, but, in reality, concealed a hollow space behind it. With the necessary authorization, on June 6th, the officers broke through the wall. Behind it, they found a large wooden crate filled with lime. As they began removing the lime, the first grim discoveries emerged. The first thing they found was a plastic bag containing a knife with dried blood. Next, they uncovered some objects that apparently belonged to the victim, followed by a bouquet of flowers placed on top of several plastic bags. Inside the bags, they found a camping sleeping bag, and within it, the remains of a woman. Following the gruesome discovery, the the body was transported for an autopsy to confirm the cause of death and to establish whether the remains were indeed those of Ciborra. Meanwhile, in Italy, Ciborra's family was on edge after a friend informed them of Marco's arrest for Paula's murder and the search for Ciborra's body. Elisabetta said that the news of her daughter's death at Marco's hands hit her like a bucket of cold water. She revealed that the only joy she had experienced during those years of uncertainty was becoming a grandmother, thanks to her son. She also shared that Ciborra's father had passed away due to illness, without ever knowing what had happened to his daughter. Shortly after, Spanish authorities contacted Elisabetta to request a DNA sample to conclusively confirm that the body entombed in the wall was her daughter's. However, there was little doubt, as the remains bore some tattoos that had been reported as distinguishing features when the disappearance was initially filed. A Spanish team traveled to Elisabetta's home to collect a saliva sample, and the DNA comparison left no room for doubt. The body was indeed that of Ciborra Gagani, who had gone missing at 22 and would have been 31 at the time of discovery. After the autopsy, it was revealed that despite the condition of the remains, the cause of death had been multiple stab wounds. More than 5 months after Ciborra's remains were found in the wall of the apartment she had shared with the man who would become her executioner, her family announced that she would be coming home. Finally, Ciborra's family and friends were able to bid her a final farewell in a funeral service. At the end of the service, friends of the young woman released balloons into the sky with messages written for someone who had once been a cheerful, good friend who only dreamed of becoming a model and finding happiness. After enduring the hardest moment a family can face, all efforts were now focused on ensuring that justice was served and that the person responsible for Ciborra's untimely death would be punished to the fullest extent of the law. On Tuesday, January 30th, 2024, Marco was testifying before the court in a hearing requested by his defense attorney. However, instead of speaking, he handed over a 17-page handwritten letter in which he admitted responsibility for Paula's death, but with notable caveats. In the letter, Marco claimed that he and Paula had a tumultuous relationship fueled by large amounts of alcohol and cocaine, which they both consumed. He confessed to taking Paula's life but alleged that she had been agitated because he owed her 50 euros and she had discovered his infidelity. Marco claimed that his only fault was defending himself too forcefully, though he did not explain how the woman's wounds ended up on her back if the attack was in self-defense. Despite his partial confession, Marco remained silent about Ciborra's case, stating only that he had wrapped her body in bags, placed it in a wooden box, covered it with flowers, filled the box with lime, and built a false wall to conceal everything. However, he denied being responsible for her death, though he admitted that what he had done was disgusting. Amidst all his lies, Marco claimed that since his arrest, he had experienced a profound spiritual awakening and was now deeply remorseful. Marco claimed that members of the Albanian mafia were responsible for the death of Ciborra. According to his twisted story, these dangerous men had loaned him 25,000 euros to start a business, specifically a brothel. However, Marco claimed that some Colombians had stolen the money after a night of partying, leaving him without the funds to start the business and unable to repay the loan. One day, the Albanian mobsters showed up at his home to collect the debt. There were 4 armed men. One pointed a gun at Marco while the other 3 confronted Ciborra. Marco claimed that during the heated exchange, one of the mobsters attacked and killed Ciborra. He added that the mobsters took 9,000 euros he had stashed in the house from his small-scale drug deals and told him that the rest of the debt would be forgiven if he disposed of Sabora's body. Given the circumstances, Marco agreed to their terms. He claimed he spent 2 days with Sabora's body in the apartment, unsure of what to do, before deciding to wall it up. As of the time of this writing, Marco's fate remains uncertain. The latest information we found was dated May 16, 2024, indicating that the court had decided to proceed with a jury trial for the case of Paula's death on charges of murder and domestic abuse. However, no estimated date has been found for the judicial process concerning Sabora Gagani's case. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.